Emily's funeral was a somber event, permeated by a heavy silence, only interrupted by the occasional sob from someone unable to contain the pain of loss. Hello, welcome, enjoy, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Mark Sullivan, the grieving husband, stood by the casket, observing the scene with a heavy heart and a tumultuous mind. He was trying to process not only the death of his wife, but also the new and strange dynamic that was emerging between her children, Jake and Lily, who, by this point, were more strangers to each other than family. The siblings stood at opposite sides of the room, as if an invisible line separated them. Jake, a 30-year-old man with disheveled hair and an expression of suppressed anger, crossed his arms, casting furious glances at his younger sister. Lily, for her part, looked like a shadow of herself, her eyes swollen from crying, but her jaw was set, as if she were determined not to give in to vulnerability. The atmosphere was tense, almost palpable, and Mark felt a knot form in his throat as he noticed the hostility between them. Sarah, Emily's sister, stood beside Mark, trying to offer some comfort. "I know this is hard, Mark. Emily was always the glue of this family," she said, her voice trembling, but as she spoke, Mark could see the insecurity in her gaze, as if she too was struggling to find her place in the new reality unfolding. "I can't understand how they got to this point," Mark replied, shaking his head in disbelief. "I never thought her death would generate so much animosity." "It's the inheritance, Mark. People go crazy when money and property are at stake," Sarah replied, looking at Emily's children. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," Mark sighed, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "I just want them to remember her as the wonderful person she was, not as the reason for discord." After the funeral, as the guests began to disperse, Mark found an envelope hidden among Emily's papers. It was her will, and upon opening it, surprise hit him like a wave. Emily had left a significant portion of the inheritance to Sarah, a gesture that should have been one of unity, but instead only provoked more discontent. "Are you kidding me?" Jake exclaimed, his tone heavy with disbelief and anger. "How could she do this? And you, Sarah, what do you have to say about it?" Sarah, taken aback, hesitated. "I didn't know, Jake. I had no idea she would do this." "Of course you didn't know. You were always her favorite," Lily shot back, her gaze sharp. "You have no idea what this means for us, do you? Our mother." "Enough," Mark intervened, trying to regain control of the situation. "This isn't going to solve anything. We need to sit down and talk as a family." But Mark's words seemed to echo in a void, and the tension only escalated. Accusations and resentments began to fly through the air, revealing a sea of grievances that had been buried for far too long. Jake pointed at Sarah. "You always thought you were superior, didn't you? Now you want what is ours." "Your selfishness knows no bounds, Jake," Sarah replied, her voice rising. "You have no idea what I went through to be by Emily's side. You don't know the real story." Lily, in tears, shouted, "The truth is we all lost our mother. And now you're arguing about money. Is that what she wanted?" Mark felt the pressure in his head increase. He wished for the situation to resolve, but the open wound seemed deeper than he had imagined. "We need to remember who she was," he said, his voice trembling. "Emily didn't want this to happen." Mark's words, however, did not have the desired effect. The fight continued, and he found himself suffocating under the pressure of being a mediator in a family battlefield. In the end, the meeting did not bring peace but only more division. Emily's children drifted apart, taking with them the hope that the pain could be healed. In the days that followed, Mark found a diary hidden among Emily's belongings. Curiosity consumed him, and he began to read her entries. With each page, he discovered a side of his wife he had never known. Her words were like a whisper from her soul, revealing intimate thoughts and feelings he had ignored. "Today I saw a blue butterfly," Emily wrote in one entry. "It reminded me of how fragile and beautiful life is, even in the darkest hours." I hope my children can find a path of light, even when everything seems lost. Mark felt a wave of sadness wash over him as he read that. He wondered if Emily had truly realized the storm that was approaching. In another entry, she mentioned a lost love, which intrigued him. Who could it be? What did it mean for the life they had built together? Meanwhile, Jake and Lily, in a temporary effort to unite, began to investigate what was happening with the inheritance. They met in a cafe, away from Mark's watchful eye, and Jake, with a determined expression, said, "We need to figure out what's going on. We can't let this end like this. Our mother deserves more than this." "I agree," Lily replied, a glimmer of determination in her eyes. "Let's come together. We need to find out what else she hid. There may be more than just money at stake." Mark, on the other hand, was engulfed in his own doubts. He decided to confront Sarah about the diary. Upon finding her, he asked, "Did you know about Emily's lost love?" Sarah, visibly nervous, hesitated to respond. I knew, but I don't know if this is the right time to talk about it, Mark. We need to be transparent, Sarah. If there's something that could affect our children, we need to discuss it now," Mark insisted, his voice firm. "I know you loved Emily, but some truths are hard to face," Sarah replied, looking down, clearly shaken. Mark felt frustration grow within him, but he knew he couldn't force Sarah to speak. The tension between them was palpable, and he realized the wounds were not just about money. They were about family, love, and secrets that could devastate everything. The fight for Emily's inheritance had only just begun, and what had once seemed a simple matter of material goods was now turning into a battlefield filled with emotions, secrets, and the harsh reality of disillusionment. Mark wondered if he could bring the family together again, or if the truth hidden in the pages of Emily's diary would ultimately consume them. Mark Sullivan sat in the office, surrounded by papers and documents that seemed increasingly confusing with each passing minute. The death of Emily was still an open wound in his heart, and the weight of the inheritance, which had now become a battlefield, added a new layer of pain. Amid the emotional chaos, he decided he needed to better understand who his wife really was. So, he began to investigate Emily's past. In a forgotten corner of the closet, he found a dusty diary that she had kept secret. The worn leather and slightly torn cover drew him in. Carefully, he opened the diary and began to read the entries, not only in search of memories, but for a deeper connection with the woman he loved. Each page revealed a side of Emily he had never known. Her fears, her hopes, and, surprisingly, her insecurities. "I feel like I'm losing touch with who I am," one of the entries began. Mark furrowed his brow, feeling his wife's anguish resonate in his own chest. The following words spoke of the internal struggle Emily faced, the pressure to be a good mother, a good wife, and at the same time, to remain true to herself. As he progressed through the pages, one mention captured his attention: "My lost love." The phrase lingered in the air, leaving Mark intrigued and unsettled. Who could this love be? Why had Emily never mentioned it to him? The thought that there was a part of her he did not know left him restless. He wondered if this lost love could have influenced Emily's choices and, consequently, the family dynamic that was now so troubled. As Mark lost himself in thought, Jake and Lily, Emily's children, were also busy, but in a different way. They, who hadn't exchanged words in years, decided on their own to investigate what was really going on with the inheritance. The rivalry between them, always latent, seemed to resurface. Jake, the older one, had a defensive posture, while Lily, the younger, didn't hesitate to question her brother's intentions. "You're just worried about the money, aren't you?" Lily said with a tone of disdain. "It's always about what you can gain, Jake. And you? You're worried about what you're going to lose." "Don't pretend you care about Mom," Jake replied, his gaze icy. Lily wouldn't be shaken. "I do care, and that's why I'm trying to uncover the truth. Who knows what else is hidden? What else did Mom leave behind?" Lily's words echoed in Jake's mind. The truth indeed seemed to be a slippery concept at that moment. Both were determined to discover more about the inheritance, but the ghosts of the past were about to become very real. Meanwhile, Mark, still immersed in the pages of the diary, began to feel like an intruder in Emily's life. He wondered if he should have sought this side of her out earlier. The information was there, hidden in a diary he had never thought to read. Emily's words revealed her fears about the family, her insecurities regarding motherhood, and the weight she felt in her obligations. I wish I could tell Mark about this, but I'm afraid of how he would react. He would never understand, one passage said. Mark felt his heart tighten as he read this. He had always thought they were an open couple, but Emily's words showed that there were barriers he had never known existed. The diary also mentioned moments of happiness, like the trips they took together and the little moments that made their life special. But the shadow of the lost love loomed over those memories, making them bittersweet. He was different, Emily wrote about this love. He made me feel alive in a way I can't explain. But I chose Mark, and that choice weighs on me. Mark felt suffocated. The choice he considered a sign of love and commitment now felt like a condemnation. He wondered if there was something more he could have done to make Emily feel free, if he could have been the partner she truly needed. That same night, as Mark reflected on the revelations in the diary, Jake and Lily were in a not-so-distant place, temporarily joining forces. The tension between them was still palpable, but there was a new determination in their eyes. "We need to find out who this David was that Mom mentioned," Jake suggested, opening a file of old news articles. "If he had any role in her life, maybe he has information that can help us." "I agree," Lily replied, hesitantly. "But what if he's the reason she never wanted to talk about the past? What if he's the reason she left us this inheritance? Are you ready to face that truth?" Jake pressed his lips together, a sign that he was aware of the implications. "We need to know. And if it changes everything? If it's true, we need to be prepared." The dynamic between them was changing, and the search for the truth was becoming a path fraught with emotional traps. Both siblings were determined, but doubt and distrust still hung over them. Meanwhile, Mark, sitting in his armchair, closed the diary and looked out the window. The night was dark and silent, reflecting the internal storm he was facing. He needed to confront Sarah, Emily's sister, but he didn't know how. The revelation from the diary weighed heavily on him, and the need to understand who his wife truly was became increasingly urgent. "Sarah needs to know about this," he murmured to himself. "She might have the answer I'm looking for." With that determination, Mark prepared for the conversation that would change everything. He didn't know what to expect, but the truth, that truth Emily had kept so well, was about to come to light. Mark Sullivan was sitting at the kitchen table, his gaze lost in the cup of coffee that was slowly cooling in front of him. The sudden death of Emily, his beloved wife, was still an open wound in his heart. The disputes over the inheritance began soon after the funeral, and now he found himself surrounded by tensions that seemed to have a life of their own. The presence of Jake and Lily, Emily's children, was laden with an animosity that Mark couldn't fully understand. They hadn't spoken in years, and the rivalry between them became more evident with each passing moment. One morning, while rummaging through some things in Emily's office drawers, Mark found a hidden diary. The worn leather and the smell of old paper piqued his curiosity. He remembered how Emily used to write about her feelings and thoughts, and he decided he needed to understand more about the woman he had loved so deeply. As he opened the diary, his hands trembled with anticipation. The pages were filled with notes about everyday life, but in some of them, Mark found mentions of a lost love. Intrigued, he began to read the entries. A particular entry caught his attention. "If I could go back, I might have made different choices. The love I lost will always be with me, like a shadow." That hit him like a punch to the stomach. What did that mean? Who was this man? Was it just a figment of his imagination, or something deeper? Mark couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. He remembered moments when Emily had been distant, lost in thought. What else did he not know about her? Mark's mind was in turmoil when he decided to confront Sarah, Emily's sister. He needed to understand if Sarah knew about this lost love. When he found her, the tension in the air was palpable. Sarah was in the living room, nervously fiddling with a scarf that seemed to have lost its original shape. "Sarah," Mark began, his voice firm but with a touch of vulnerability. "I found Emily's diary. She mentioned a lost love. Do you know anything about it?" Sarah's gaze shifted, and Mark could see the internal struggle she was facing. "Mark, I don't know if this is the right time to talk about it," she replied, hesitantly. "But this is exactly the time. Emily is gone, and now all we have are questions. I need to know if you know this man." Sarah sighed, her gaze finally locking onto Mark's. "I do know him, but I can't talk about it. It's complicated." "Complicated?" Mark exclaimed, frustration growing within him. "You're telling me my wife had a relationship with another man, and you don't think I deserve to know who he is?" Sarah looked down, as if the truth was suffocating her. "Emily and I had our own battles with the past. She didn't want you to know. It was a secret that could hurt even more." At that moment, the living room door opened, and Jake and Lily walked in, interrupting the conversation. The tension between the siblings was palpable, and Mark realized that the discussion about the inheritance was about to explode again. "Oh great, another family meeting," Jake said sarcastically, crossing his arms. "This isn't the time for that, Jake," Mark tried to soothe, but the anger in Jake's eyes was undeniable. "What's not the time for? For us to finally talk about what's going on with the inheritance. Do you think Mom would leave everything to you and that woman?" Jake pointed at Sarah, who stood there, stunned. "Jake, this isn't just about the inheritance. It's about everything that's happening," Mark defended, but the tension had already turned into a battlefield. "About everything that's happening? How can you say that?" Lily screamed, her voice heavy with pain. "We lost our mother, and all you can think about is money. Is that what matters to you?" "That's not what I said," Mark replied, his patience wearing thin. "I'm trying to understand what's happening in this family. Emily left a will, and we need to discuss it." Accusations flew. The repressed feelings between the siblings were finally surfacing. Jake and Lily glared at each other, their eyes filled with resentment and pain. "You have no idea what we've been through," Jake said, his voice low but charged with emotion. "You and our mother were always a unit. And now, you're here, trying to control everything. The only thing I want is to protect what our mother left." Mark shouted, exasperated. "And what did she leave? A fortune? You don't understand, Mark. This was never just about money for us. This is about love, about what she meant to us and what you might be hiding." Lily interjected, her voice trembling but firm. Mark felt a wave of despair. He wasn't just losing his wife, but also the connection with her children. He wanted everyone to come together, but the distrust was so deep-rooted that it felt impossible. He needed a solution, and fast. Not knowing how to handle the situation, Mark decided he needed help. He remembered a lawyer friend who had always been by his side during tough times. He picked up the phone and called him, seeking advice on the implications of the will and how to handle the situation in the best way possible. "Mark, I understand this is a difficult time, but there are things you need to consider," said his friend on the other end of the line. "The inheritance may not just be a financial legacy. There are emotions, promises, and above all, your wife's wishes that need to be respected." Mark hung up the phone and looked out the window, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. He knew the truth was more complex than he had imagined. With a heavy heart and a mind swirling with doubts, he braced himself for what was to come. The inheritance was not just a matter of money. It was a minefield of secrets and lies that, if left unresolved, could destroy the family Emily had left behind. Mark Sullivan was determined to unite his family in such a difficult time. After the sudden death of Emily, his wife, the tension between her children, Jake and Lily, was only escalating. They hadn't spoken in years, and the atmosphere was heavy. To try to ease the situation, he decided to organize a dinner in memory of Emily, hoping that happy memories would bring some peace to the house filled with pain and resentment. That night, the table was elegantly set, with lit candles and a bouquet of flowers at the center, but the atmosphere was far from welcoming. Mark, nervous, made an effort to smile and greet everyone, but soon realized that Jake and Lily barely looked at each other. "Come on, everyone. It's a night to remember your mother. Let's come together for her," Mark said, trying to encourage conversation. Lily, with a disdainful look, replied, "Come together? That must be easy for you, huh? Mark, you're not the one dividing all this between us." The anger in her words was palpable. Jake, for his part, just crossed his arms, as if waiting for the situation to unfold in a way he had already predicted. Mark, not knowing how to deal with the hostility, decided to change the subject. "I remember when Emily made that Christmas dinner. Do you remember? She was so happy, preparing everything with so much care." But his attempts at nostalgia were interrupted by Sarah, Emily's sister, who, sitting at the table, added, "She always did her best for all of us." "But the truth is that things have changed, haven't they, Jake? You and your sister have a lot to discuss." The tension escalated as Sarah, trying to divert the conversation, mentioned how Emily had loved the family. She always believed that unity is what matters, even if things didn't go as planned, she said, her voice tinged with sadness. However, her words only sparked a new wave of discord. "Unity? You talk about unity, but it seems like you're here to take advantage of the inheritance," Jake shot back, raising his voice. "Do you think you have any right to this just because you're her sister?" Sarah, visibly offended, retorted, "And do you think you can just ignore what Emily wanted? She left me a significant part of the inheritance, and I'm not going to apologize for it. Maybe you should be more concerned with what she really wanted instead of just the money." Lily, who had remained silent until that moment, decided to intervene. "It's easy for you to say, Sarah. You don't know what we've been through. You don't know what it's like to lose a mother and then have to compete with someone who isn't even part of our family." Mark, realizing that the situation was about to spiral out of control, tried to interject. "Guys, please. This isn't the time for arguments. We're here to remember Emily, not to fight." He looked at Sarah and then at the kids, feeling a mix of frustration and helplessness. The pain of losing his wife was still very fresh, and now he had to deal with these family rivalries. In the midst of the discussion, Sarah, trying to change the subject, made a subtle revelation. "You know, I've always admired the love Emily had for you, but there were things she never shared. A mysterious man was always present in her life. Sometimes I wonder if that love could have changed everything for her." She said these words with a tone of melancholy, but the immediate reaction was one of confusion and distrust. Jake, with an intrigued and skeptical look, questioned, "What mysterious man? Are you insinuating that she had a lover? That's ridiculous, Sarah. You're just trying to divert attention from yourself." Lily, on the other hand, seemed to absorb the information. "Why didn't you ever tell us anything about this? What else do you know?" Her expression was one of concern, but also curiosity. Mark, restless, decided to investigate later. As tensions rose, he felt like a spectator in a family drama that seemed endless. The dinner, which was supposed to be an occasion to honor Emily's memory, turned into an emotional battleground. At the end of the meal, when everyone was visibly exhausted from the discussion, Mark retreated to Emily's room, seeking calm. Upon entering, his heart ached at the sight of the little things she had left behind. It was then that, in one of the bedside table drawers, he found a peculiar object, a small carved wooden box that he didn't remember seeing before. Curious, he opened it and found an old necklace inside, with a pendant that seemed to have special significance. As he examined the necklace, a wave of insecurity washed over him. What else did he not know about his wife? What more was hidden beneath the surface of that seemingly perfect life? The dilemma about the lost love mentioned in the diary now seemed much more real. He wondered if that necklace was somehow connected to the mysterious man that Sarah had mentioned. Sitting on the bed, Mark felt he was in a labyrinth of secrets, distrusts, and grievances. The true inheritance that Emily had left for him seemed much more complex than just material possessions. With his mind full of questions, he knew he needed to confront Sarah about what she had insinuated. But the idea of opening more wounds in that family made him apprehensive. The tension from the previous night still lingered in the air when he decided that sooner or later, the truth would have to be revealed. Mark got up, the necklace still in his hands, determined to face whatever truth might bring, aware that each revealed secret could mean a new chapter of pain or perhaps a path to healing. Mark Sullivan was sitting at his kitchen table, his hands over his face, trying to process the latest revelations that had unfolded since the sudden death of his wife, Emily. The atmosphere was silent, but the tension hung in the air like a thick cloud. He knew he needed to confront Sarah, Emily's sister, about the information the woman possessed. The idea that there were hidden secrets surrounding his wife's life tormented him, and curiosity mixed with anguish. "Sarah, we need to talk," Mark said, breaking the silence with a tense voice. He found her in the living room, looking out the window as if she were waiting for something or someone. Upon hearing his call, she turned, and Mark could see the anxiety in her eyes. "About what, Mark?" Sarah replied, trying to maintain her composure, but the hesitation in her voice was clear. "About Emily's diary. You know more than you're saying. We need to discuss what you know about her past." Mark's determination was palpable. He could no longer live in uncertainty. Sarah took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a brief moment as if preparing to dive deep into unknown waters. I don't know if this is the right time for that. Things are very confusing right now," she said, looking away. "Confusing? Sarah, are you telling me you wouldn't tell me if you knew something that could change everything?" Mark was on the brink of frustration, the need for answers turning into an almost desperate impulse. I don't want you to get hurt more than you already are. This truth could be devastating," Sarah confessed, her eyes full of concern. "Devastating? What could be so bad that you would hesitate to tell me?" "I need to know," Mark insisted, his voice rising slightly in intensity. He remembered the diary entries he had read, where Emily mentioned a lost love. The idea that his wife had a hidden past was consuming him. "Emily had an affair, Mark. A man named David. He may be Jake and Lily's biological father," Sarah finally revealed, her voice trembling with each word. The silence that followed was deafening. Mark felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under him. "What? How do you know this?" He could barely formulate the question, disbelief etched on his face. "I knew David. Emily told me once, in a casual conversation. At the time, I didn't know it could be so important. I thought it was just a story from her past," Sarah explained, the expression of pain on her face. "So all of this, Jake and Lily, they might not be my biological children?" Despair began to creep into Mark's voice. "Mark, I'm not sure. I don't know what really happened between them. When Emily died, many things went unanswered," Sarah responded, her hands trembling slightly. Before Mark could react, Sarah's phone rang, interrupting the conversation. She quickly answered, a look of panic spreading across her face. "Yes? What do you want?" Her voice was tense, and Mark felt a wave of discomfort realizing that the call seemed to be from someone pressuring her. He decided to wait, but the anxiety began to rise within him. "Sarah, who was that?" Mark asked as soon as she hung up. It was just an acquaintance. Nothing for you to worry about," she quickly replied, but the evasion was evident. "You can't tell me it's nothing. What else are you hiding?" Mark insisted, frustration growing. He could feel there was more to the story, something Sarah wasn't ready to reveal. "It's not what you think, Mark. I just don't want you to get hurt. It's all very complicated," she said, her voice almost pleading for understanding. "Complicated or not, I need to know the truth. If I'm not their father, I can't live with that lie," Mark declared, his determination solidifying. He knew he needed to fully understand the situation, not just for himself, but also for Emily's children. I promise I'll tell you everything, but not now. Not while things are so unstable. First, we need to get organized, Sarah said, her voice calmer but laden with concern. She moved closer to Mark, placing a hand on his shoulder. Trust me, please. Mark was torn between anger and the need to protect the family. He knew the truth was about to explode into his life, but what could he do? He couldn't force Sarah to open her heart, and the uncertainty continued to consume his mind. Meanwhile, Jake, Emily's eldest son, was in his own battle. He also felt there was more about his mother's past that no one was revealing. Jake had started investigating Sarah's life, questioning mutual friends and revisiting old memories that didn't seem to fit. He felt that the woman he knew as Aunt Sarah was hiding secrets that could change everything. Why didn't you tell me about David? You knew he could be the father. Jake shouted in a tense conversation with Lily, his sister. They were at a local cafe, where they were trying to discuss the inheritance situation and what they would do next. I didn't know. Do you think I wouldn't have done something if I had known? Lily replied, exasperated. We're both in the same boat here. There's no point in arguing among ourselves. But Sarah knows more than she's saying. I can feel it, Jake insisted, frustration showing in his tone. He wasn't sure how, but he knew there was something deeper behind their interactions. Meanwhile, at home, Mark was preparing for a new day of uncertainty. He knew he needed to confront Sarah again, but the idea that she might be hiding even more information left him uneasy. He was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The inheritance and the struggle for the truth were intertwined, and he couldn't allow more secrets to pile up between them. I will find out the truth, no matter what happens, he murmured to himself, looking out the window as the sun began to set, reflecting his hopes and fears in a golden hue. He didn't know that the journey was just beginning, and that the revelations to come could change their lives forever. Mark sat at his desk, the soft morning light filtering through the window, but his mind was far from the tranquility that the scene provided. He had been called to a meeting with the family lawyer, and the weight of that summons left him restless. The revelations about Emily's will were still fresh in his mind, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something much bigger was at stake. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was the lawyer's office, informing him that the meeting was scheduled for the same day at 3 in the afternoon. Mark took a deep breath, trying to prepare for what was to come. He knew that the inheritance was not just a matter of money, but of secrets and lies that could undermine the fragility of the family he was trying to keep together. Later, at the meeting, Mark entered the lawyer's office, a stern environment filled with dusty books. The lawyer, a middle-aged man with a serious demeanor, gestured for him to sit. Mark, thank you for coming. We have a lot to discuss, the lawyer said, arranging the papers on the desk. Emily's will is more complicated than it seems. Mark felt a chill in his stomach. Complicated how? The lawyer looked into Mark's eyes, as if weighing his words. The portion that Sarah received from the inheritance may be contested. There is a clause in the will that mentions a legacy of disillusion. This raises questions about the true nature of the inheritance. Legacy of disillusion? Mark repeated, confused. What does that mean? It's not clear in the will. Actually, it isn't. What I can tell you is that there are legal implications that could affect the distribution of the inheritance. You should be aware that Emily's family may contest the validity of the will, especially considering the relationship you and Emily had. Mark leaned back in the chair, feeling the pressure mount. Are you saying someone could try to nullify her will? Yes, and the situation is not simple. Jake and Lily have the right to contest, especially if they believe Sarah should not have received a significant portion of the inheritance. And this could lead to a legal battle that might expose more family secrets. Mark's heart began to race. He remembered the tensions between Jake and Lily, the rivalry and resentment that were always bubbling to the surface. And what do I do now? He asked, his voice trembling. You need to prepare, Mark. It's important that you take a firm stance. If the situation escalates, you'll have to defend what you believe is fair. And moreover, if Jake and Lily start investigating Emily's past, you need to be ready for what they might discover. Mark nodded, recalling Emily's diary that he had found. What else could she have hidden? And if they find something that compromises the image I have of her? What if what's in the diary is used against me? The lawyer sighed. That's a possibility. If there's anything in the diary that involves legal or moral issues, it could greatly influence the dispute. I would recommend that you keep it a secret until you have a better understanding of the situation. With his mind racing with concerns, Mark left the office and decided he needed to talk to Jake and Lily. He knew the dynamic between them was about to intensify. The revelations about the inheritance, now contestable, could be the spark for an all-out war. When he got home, it didn't take long to find Jake and Lily in the living room, whispering to each other, their exchanged glances full of distrust. As soon as Mark entered, the two fell silent, and the tension in the air was palpable. "We need to talk," Mark said, trying to adopt a tone of authority, but his voice sounded hesitant. "The inheritance situation is not simple." "Oh, so you already know," Jake shot back, crossing his arms. "What else are you going to hide from us? Mom always had her secrets, and now you want us to stay quiet while Sarah and you take advantage of the situation. Lily, are you with him or with us?" Jake turned to his sister, his eyes filled with frustration. "Because it seems like you're on his side." "This isn't about being on anyone's side, Jake," Lily replied, her voice a mix of anger and sadness. "It's about what our mother really wanted. And I don't know if that includes you and Sarah having a bigger piece than we should." Mark sat down, feeling overwhelmed. "It's not that simple. The inheritance is not just a sum of money. There are clauses that can change everything. And if you're not careful, you could end up losing more than you gain." "Are you threatening us?" Jake asked, his voice sharp. "No. I'm trying to warn you that the situation is delicate. We need to understand what's really happening before making any rash decisions." Lily looked at Jake, searching for an answer in his eyes. "And if we find out there are more secrets, what will we do then?" "Then we should be ready to face it together," Mark said, determination beginning to rise in his voice. "We need to be a team, not enemies. Any feud between you will only make it easier for those who want to undermine your mother's memory." Jake shook his head, resentment still evident in his gaze. "I don't trust you, Mark. You may be here as a worried husband, but it's what we don't know that could hurt us. I understand your distrust, Jake, but we need to find ways to come together. Let's not let these disputes drive us further apart," Mark said, trying to appeal to reason. A heavy silence fell over the room, and Mark felt that his words were not having an effect. The atmosphere was charged with unresolved emotions and grievances that had accumulated over the years. He knew that the truth about Emily and the inheritance was a minefield, and any misstep could result in even deeper wounds. "I'm not sure we can trust Sarah either," Lily finally said, breaking the silence. "She has her own interests and might be manipulating everything for her benefit. So what do we do?" Jake asked, his voice lower but still full of distrust. "Should we investigate her past? What else can we uncover?" Mark knew this was a dangerous line. You need to be careful. Investigating might bring to light truths that perhaps should remain buried. And that could affect not just you, but all of us. The tension in the room felt electric, and the reality of what was at stake weighed on them like a dark cloud. Mark realized he needed allies, not adversaries, if he wanted to unravel the secrets surrounding Emily's inheritance while also protecting her memory. But distrust lingered in the air, and he wasn't sure how he could bring the family back together before time ran out. Mark sat down at the living room table, watching the faces of Jake, Lily, and Sarah. The tension in the air was palpable, like a thread about to snap. He knew it was time to face the truth, to lay all the cards on the table and allow the grievances of the past to finally be exposed. What was at stake was much more than an inheritance. It was the very essence of the family that was crumbling. "We need to talk," Mark began, his voice steady but laden with emotion. "I think we all know that this atmosphere of rivalry and distrust will get us nowhere. Emily wouldn't have wanted this." Jake looked at his father with a skeptical expression. "What do you want us to do, Mark? You saw how they behaved at the funeral. They don't care about anything but the money." "That's not true," Lily interjected, crossing her arms. "We're here because our mother is gone, and we can't just ignore that. But at the same time, we can't pretend there are no conflicts." Sarah, sitting at the edge of the table, looked paler than usual. "I just want to understand what's happening. Emily wasn't just your wife. She was my sister. And I can't stand seeing you two fighting over something that, in the end, might not be worth it." Mark took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the words he was about to speak. "What I want, above all, is for us to be honest with each other. Emily left a legacy that goes beyond what she owned financially. She left us each other, and if we don't take care of that, we'll lose everything." "Legacy? You talk as if the inheritance isn't an important issue, but it's all we have right now," Jake retorted, his frustration showing. "You have no idea what we're facing. It's not just about the fortune, but about what our mother represented to us." "And what do you think she represented? A bank account full of money?" Mark replied, his voice rising. "Emily was more than that. She was love, sacrifice, and yes, she had her secrets too. But it's time to deal with them." Lily, who had been listening in silence, decided to intervene. "Mark, you're not being fair. Jake and I lost our mother, and now we're facing a will that seems to have more secrets than answers. How can we deal with this without understanding the whole picture?" The silence that followed was heavy. Mark looked at Sarah, who seemed lost in thought. "Sarah, do you have something to say?" She hesitated, looking at Emily's children, before finally speaking up. Maybe it's time to talk about what we know. What I know about Emily that you don't." "What do you mean?" Jake asked, contradicting his expectation. "What do you mean by that?" "I knew her diary," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "Emily wrote about her feelings, her worries, and even about a lost love. She never told me who it was, but I always knew there was something more in her life." "A lost love?" Lily questioned distrustfully. "That doesn't make sense. Mom never told us about that." "Because she didn't want you to know. She didn't want you to see her differently. But the truth is that this lost love could have changed everything. And I can't stay silent while this drives us further apart." Mark was silent, absorbing Sarah's words. Emily's diary, which he had found, now seemed to be a key to understanding not only the woman he loved, but also the family that was disintegrating before his eyes. "You know who this lost love is?" "We need to know," he insisted. "I'm not sure," Sarah replied, her voice almost a whisper. "But it could be David. He was someone she mentioned a few times. A name that always seemed to cast a shadow over our family." "David? What do you know about him?" Jake asked, his curiosity piqued. "Only that he wasn't just a fling. There was something more. Something that, if revealed, could change everything." I hesitated to speak because I didn't want to hurt you any more than you already were, but now I feel like I can't hide it any longer. "Are you telling me that our mother had an affair with a man who could impact our inheritance?" Jake said, his tone now heavy with disbelief and anger. "That's absurd. It's not just about the inheritance, Jake. It's about who we were as a family. And what that means for us now," Sarah tried to explain. "If she really had a relationship with David, it could mean that you might not be her biological children. But I'm not sure." The room fell silent, and the tension rose with each passing second. Mark felt the weight of Sarah's words. He looked at Jake and Lily, who seemed to be processing the revelation with difficulty. "We need to face this head-on. We can't have secrets between us. Emily deserves that, and so do we. And if it's true, what does that mean for us?" Lily asked, her eyes filled with tears. "What happens to our family?" "I don't know," Mark admitted, "but we can't let this destroy us. We need to find the truth together as a family. But what if this truth is too much to bear? Jake questioned, his voice low. What if everything we believe to be true crumbles? If that's the case, then we'll need each other more than ever. Because in the end, we're family, Mark replied, determination growing in his voice. And we need to come together to discover who we were and who we want to be from here on out. The atmosphere in the room began to shift. The tension was still present, but there was a new understanding in the air. They were about to face a battle, but no longer alone. Mark looked at Emily's children and at Sarah, feeling that, despite everything, there was hope. It was time to confront the ghosts of the past and seek the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Let's gather again tomorrow. I want everyone here to bring their memories, their stories, and we'll find out who Emily really was, Mark finally said, his expression resolute. We're in this together. And if we need help, we can seek a lawyer or someone who can guide us through this process. Lily and Jake exchanged glances, and although there was still distrust, there was a glimpse of understanding. Sarah nodded, a bit more at ease, and Mark felt he had taken the first step towards healing a wound that had been open for far too long. As if the weight of the world had become a little lighter, they stood up, still dealing with raw emotions, but determined to face whatever came next. The future was uncertain, but the truth might finally bring the peace they had been seeking. Mark was immersed in a whirlwind of emotions. With each passing day, the pain of losing Emily became more unbearable, and the dispute over the inheritance only seemed to intensify that pain. He couldn't understand how the children of his deceased wife could be so obsessed with money and material goods, while the true essence of Emily seemed to be lost in the shadows of secrets and lies. Now, more than ever, he needed the truth. And the truth was tied to David, the mysterious man who had become an enigma in his life. With renewed determination, Mark decided it was time to seek out David. He had heard the name a few times in the whispered conversations between Sarah and Emily, but he never imagined that this man could play such a central role in his wife's life. With the address noted, he left home, his mind swirling with questions and insecurities. The drive to David's house felt longer than usual, and the weight of the unknown accompanied him with every step. Upon arriving at the address, Mark stood in front of a simple yet well-kept house, with a modest garden that displayed flowers in good condition. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he was doing the right thing. But, with a deep breath, he approached the door and knocked. The sound echoed in his mind, as if he were knocking at the door of destiny itself. David answered, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a look that conveyed a mix of wisdom and sadness. He seemed surprised to see Mark, but didn't hesitate to invite him in. "What brings you here, Mark?" he asked, closing the door behind him. "We need to talk about Emily," Mark replied, his voice a bit firmer than he felt. I need to understand what happened between you." David nodded and led Mark to a cozy living room. The space was decorated with family photos and some pieces of art that seemed to tell stories of a happy past. Mark sat in an armchair, trying to organize his thoughts. "Emily was an incredible woman," David began, his tone nostalgic. "I loved her in a way I can't explain, but our relationship was complicated. There were many things at stake." Mark felt a tightening in his chest. "Complicated how? What do you mean by that?" "She was trapped in a world that suffocated her," David replied, looking out the window as if trying to find the right words. "Emily had to make difficult choices, and I was a chapter of her life that she tried to leave behind." "Chapter? You were in love with her, and now I'm what? Just an accident?" Anger and frustration spilled over in Mark's voice. "No, that's not what I mean," David hurried to clarify. "I never wanted to interfere in her life. I had hopes that one day we could be together, but the reality was that she had a family, and that was something I respected." Mark felt his heart tighten. "Do you think your presence in her life influenced how she dealt with the family? The inheritance that is now in dispute?" David sighed, seeming to weigh his words. "Yes, I believe it had an impact. Her relationship with the family was complex. There were secrets she never felt comfortable sharing. And with her death, those secrets came to light. What secrets? Mark asked, his curiosity growing. She never told me, but there was something that haunted her, something related to a past she didn't want to relive. I knew she had a sister, Sarah, and that her family had its own complicated dynamics. Emily felt trapped between her love for you and the family ties that suffocated her. Mark looked at David, trying to understand the depth of the words he was saying. And do you really believe that my life, as her husband, was built on lies? It's not that it's a lie, but rather an omission. Emily loved you, but she struggled with the ghosts of the past. What I knew is that she had a lost love, and it affected her deeply. Mark remembered Emily's diary, the pages he had read where she mentioned that lost love. Do you know who that lost love was? He asked. David hesitated, seeming to weigh his answer. I can't say for sure, but I know that this love was linked to a choice Emily made. There was a man she loved before you, and he was a significant part of her life. Who was he? What happened? Mark was becoming increasingly anxious. I can't give you details, but what I can say is that this man represents what she could have been if she had taken a different path. She made choices for the family, and that made her unhappy at times. Mark felt his legs tremble under the weight of the revelation. This changes everything. What else do you know? David looked into Mark's eyes, as if weighing his words. I don't want you to see this as a betrayal, Mark. I loved her, but I also respected her. And when she chose you, I knew I had to let her go. But the past never completely disappears. So, you're telling me I'm not the only one who loved her? That there was another man? Mark's voice grew more intense. Yes, but that doesn't diminish the love she had for you. She chose you, and that's what matters. But this story can't be ignored, and I fear that if you don't uncover the whole truth, it could destroy what's left of your family. Mark felt a wave of anger and confusion. I need to know more. Where can I find this man? I need to understand all of this before the inheritance dispute becomes even more chaotic. David hesitated again. He could be anywhere. What I can do is give you a clue. He used to work at an art gallery in the city. If you really want to find the truth, this might be your best chance. Mark stood up, feeling a mix of determination and despair. I appreciate your honesty, David. I don't know what this means for me or my family, but I need to uncover the truth. Take care, Mark. The truth can be more devastating than you imagine. And remember, the past has a strange way of resurfacing when you least expect it. David said goodbye, and Mark left the house, feeling as if he had been launched into a new mission, one that could change everything in his life. As soon as Mark left David's house, the outside world seemed darker. He knew he had to confront this new reality, but his heart was heavy with the implications of what he had learned. The truth about Emily, about her past, and about the love she had lost could dismantle the foundation of his life. As he drove back home, David's words echoed in his mind. He was about to plunge into an abyss of secrets that could cost him more than just the inheritance. And with each passing mile, his anxiety grew, leaving him more determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The atmosphere in the living room of Mark Sullivan's house was heavy, almost palpable. The lights were dim, creating a tense atmosphere that seemed to reflect the inner struggle of everyone present. Mark, with his heart racing, looked at the faces of Jake and Lily, who were sitting on either side, as if they were two opposing sides of a coin. Sarah was in front of them, nervous but determined to face what was to come. David's presence, Emily's lover, made everyone feel even more exposed, as if each of their secrets was about to be laid bare. Why did you bring him here, Mark? Jake was the first to break the silence, his tone heavy with indignation. This is madness. He has nothing to do with our mother. He has everything to do with it, Jake, Mark replied, his voice firm but laden with a sadness he could barely contain. David knows the truth, and it's time for all of us to know it too. Lily looked at her father, her gaze filled with doubt. And what do you expect him to tell us? That our mother deceived us? That everything we thought we knew about her was a lie? That's not what I want, Mark said, trying to ease the tension. But we need to understand what really happened. We can't keep living like this, surrounded by secrets and distrust. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to stay centered as frustration and fear surrounded her. Mark, you don't know what you're doing. David may bring more pain than healing. That's not what we need right now. Pain or healing, we need the truth, Mark insisted, staring intently at Sarah. And the truth may hurt, but it's better than living in lies. David, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. His tone was calm, but there was a gravity in his voice that silenced everyone. I'm not here to cause more pain, but Emily's story is not simple, and it's important that you hear what I have to say. Jake stood up, indignant. And who gave you the right to talk about my mother? You have no place here. Jake, please, Mark intervened, his voice raised but firm. This behavior won't get us anywhere. David, ignoring the taunts, looked into each of their eyes. Emily was a complex woman, full of secrets she carried with her. Her love for you was undeniable, but there were parts of her life she hid even from herself. What parts? Lily asked, her curiosity overcoming her momentary anger. A love that was never forgotten, David said, his gaze lost in memories. A connection that began before you were born. A love that became a shadow in her life, something that prevented her from being completely free. Are you implying that she didn't love us? Jake shot back, his voice bitter. That she had another man who was more important than us? No, that's not it, David hurried to respond. But Emily's life was marked by difficult choices, and each choice had its consequences. Mark felt the weight of David's words and, at the same time, the resistance of his family. What are you trying to say, David? He asked, seeking clarity amid the emotional confusion. Hesitant, David continued. Emily and I met at a moment of vulnerability. She was lost, and I was someone who understood her. What started as an affair became something deep, but her life took a different turn. She chose you, but she never stopped remembering me. The silence in the room was deafening. Jake and Lily exchanged looks, confused and distressed, while Sarah appeared trapped in a web of conflicting emotions. And what does that mean for us? Lily finally broke the silence, her voice low but firm. If you really had a relationship with our mother, what does that mean for our family? For our inheritance? It means that the truth about who you are may not be what you think, David replied, his voice heavy with the weight of his words. Emily was concerned about what you would know. She wanted to protect you from a past that could hurt you. So, you're saying there could be more secrets? Jake questioned, anger now mixed with palpable anxiety. What do you know about us? What else are you hiding? Jake, calm down, Mark tried to intervene, realizing the situation was escalating quickly. David isn't the enemy here. We're all trying to understand what happened. But that's not fair, Jake exclaimed, his voice echoing in the room. We can't just accept what he's saying. This is madness. Sometimes the truth is madness, David said, his gaze fixed on Jake. And the truth can be painful, but it's the only way for you to free yourselves from the past. If you don't confront it now, the pain will only accumulate. Sarah seemed to be in her own internal battle. If you're saying Emily's relationship with you could have changed everything, what do you really know, David? What else haven't you told us? I'm not here to destabilize your lives, David replied, his sincerity evident. But I know Emily was carrying a burden. What she did, the decision she made, affected more than just her. You have the right to know the truth, no matter how difficult it is. Mark, observing the scene, realized the situation was slipping out of his control. We need clarity. We can't continue like this, amidst assumptions. David, you need to tell us everything. What really happened between you and Emily? David hesitated for a moment, as if weighing his words. Emily and I had a relationship that wasn't just physical. There was love, a love she always respected, even when she decided to move on. But there was a secret, something Emily never shared with you that kept her tied to me. What secret? Lily's voice trembled as everyone in the room braced for the impact of the words to come. I am the father of Jake and Lily, David revealed, his words falling like a bomb. The silence that followed was oppressive, filled with disbelief and shock. Mark felt the ground shake beneath his feet. What are you saying? That doesn't make sense. Emily never confirmed it, but I always knew, David continued, his gaze fixed on the floor. She had to make difficult decisions, and I respected her. But the truth is out there, and you have the right to know. Jake and Lily were frozen, each absorbing the revelation in different ways. Jake, with the expression of someone who has just been struck, and Lily, with tears in her eyes, struggling against the reality unfolding before them. If this is true, then who am I? Jake asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. Who am I if my father isn't who I always thought he was? You are who you've always been, Jake, Mark said, his voice tense, but trying to bring a sense of stability. That's a truth that doesn't change. You will always be my son, regardless of what David said. But the confusion was evident. Lily, her mind racing, turned to David. Why didn't you speak up before? Why let our mother carry this burden alone? She wanted to protect you, David explained, his voice sad. Emily believed this was best for her family. But now, the truth can no longer be ignored. The atmosphere in the room was thick, and everyone's emotions were on edge. Mark, struggling to find the right words, looked at each family member. What had started as a conversation about inheritance and disputes had turned into a battle of identities and unspoken truths. The tension was palpable, and the only certainty they all had was that nothing would ever be the same. David's revelation not only challenged Jake and Lily's perception of themselves, but also destabilized the family structure they knew. In the depths of pain and confusion, one question hung in the air. How to move forward in the face of such a devastating truth? Mark was sitting in his office, the daylight filtering through the curtains, but he could hardly enjoy the beauty of the scene. His mind was a storm of emotions and confusions. The weight of the revelations he had received in the family meeting still left him dazed. Sarah, his sister-in-law, had revealed that she had an affair with David, the lover of his deceased wife, Emily. The revelation not only dismantled the image Mark had of his family, but also left a deep mark on his heart. He looked at Emily's diary, which was open on the table. The yellowed pages contained secrets and memories that now felt heavier than ever. What else could she have hidden? What more could exist beyond betrayals and disillusionment? The thought tormented him. He stood up, determined to seek more answers, when his eyes fell on a letter, partially visible, caught between the pages of the diary. With trembling hands, he pulled it out and carefully unrolled it. If you are reading this, the truth may be more devastating than you imagine. The words burned in his mind. Mark's heart raced. That phrase echoed like a warning. He sat down again, the paper now heavy in his hands. What could be so devastating that Emily felt compelled to warn him? He began to read, each word like a stab. Emily wrote about a secret she had kept for years, a mystery that connected not only her but her entire family. She mentioned an event that had occurred years earlier, a summer when everything changed, a summer Mark had never known about. Emily spoke of a trip she took with Sarah and that, during that trip, something happened that changed the course of their lives. It was a moment of weakness, the letter said, a moment I thought I had forgotten, but that has always haunted me. Sarah and I were so young and naive. I never thought this would have such deep consequences. But I need you to know that not only was my love for you true, but so was the guilt I carry. Mark felt a knot form in his throat. What could be so terrifying? He continued reading, each sentence revealing more than he expected. Emily described a relationship she had with a man before she met him, a man who would change everything. That man, she said, was David. But not like you think. What happened between us was much more complicated than a simple romance. Mark's confusion deepened. What do you mean? He murmured, without realizing it. He remembered Sarah's words, the revelation of her affair with David. What else haven't you told me? He thought, feeling anger and sadness rising. However, what shocked him the most was the mention that David could be the biological father of Jake and Lily. The words in the letter seemed to dance before his eyes. If you are reading this, and if David really is their father, you must decide how you want to deal with this truth. I don't want you to feel trapped in a legacy of disillusionment. The choice is yours. Mark felt his head spin. How could he have been so naive? He stood up, the letter still in hand, and decided he needed to confront Sarah. He couldn't let this go. The revelations were piling up, and he needed answers, not just for himself, but also for Jake and Lily. Sarah, he called, his voice echoing down the hallway of the house. She appeared at the door, her eyes red and swollen, as if she had been crying. What is it, Mark? Her expression was one of concern, but also defensive. I need to talk to you. Now. Mark's tone was firm, and Sarah seemed to hesitate, but soon approached him, her hesitant steps echoing on the wooden floor. About what? Sarah asked, trying to hide the anxiety in her voice. About David. About what you haven't told me. He held the letter tightly. Emily left a secret that could change everything we know, and I can't deal with more lies. Sarah paled, her eyes widening at the sight of the letter. Mark, please, no. You don't know what you're asking. I need to know. I deserve to know the truth. And Jake and Lily deserve to know too. You know they might not be my children biologically. You know that. Mark, I didn't know how to tell you this. Sarah's voice trembled, and she seemed on the verge of collapse. Emily was always protective of you and them. She never wanted you to know. It was a secret she was willing to take to the grave. But now we can't hide it anymore. This lie could destroy us all. What else do you know? Mark was close to losing his patience, frustration and sadness mixing in his heart. I know that David, that he was a family friend, and that their relationship was more serious than you imagine. But I never thought Emily would leave you and the kids in the dark. She had her reasons, Mark. She loved you. Loving isn't enough when it comes to lies. Mark shouted, the pain in his voice palpable. What else are you hiding, Sarah? I can't talk about it. I can't go into more details. It's too painful. What happened that summer, it was something that changed our lives forever. We need to face this together, Sarah. If we don't do it now, it will be even worse when the truth comes out. And what if someone finds out before we do? Mark was almost pleading. Sarah looked at him, and for the first time, he saw vulnerability in her gaze. Mark, you don't understand. If David is their father, it will change everything. And if the kids find out, they will never look at you the same way. And I don't know how to deal with that. If we don't tell the truth, it will eat away at everything we've built. And if they find out from someone else, it will be even more devastating. Mark's voice was calmer now, but the determination in his eyes was undeniable. After a long silence, Sarah finally nodded, tears streaming down her face. Okay, let's talk about it. But you need to be prepared for the consequences. Mark took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation. I'm ready. We need to do this for Emily's memory and for Jake and Lily's future. They deserve to know the truth, and so do I. Let's face this together. As Mark spoke, the echo of Emily's words in the letter still haunted him. The truth may be more devastating than you imagine. He wondered how far this truth would take them and if he could withstand the impact. The journey was just beginning, and he knew that what came next could be the greatest battle of his life. The story has come to an end, but the excitement continues. Want more stories like this? Subscribe to the channel, like and activate the bell so you don't miss any new videos. Your participation is very important to us. A big kiss and see you next time.